get ready to sell.
Are you ready?
Yeah. How about 300 and 300?
Join the gang and let the bidding begin.
This is why we do this.
Storage wars turned strangers bidding on abandoned lockers into household names. For 15 years, A&E's hit series made auctioneers, pickers, and treasure hunters into reality TV royalty. But behind the you-up catchphrases and jackpot finds, the cast has lived through real tragedy, deaths, lawsuits, arrests, and controversy that never made it onto the show itself. Here's what's actually been documented about the people who made Storage Wars must-watch TV and where their stories stand today. Mark Bolello was one of the show's earliest breakout personalities, known to fans as Rico Suave for his flashy style. He ran his own liquidation business, Bolello Incorporated, and became especially well known for one particular find: a rare Superman comic book, once stolen from actor Nicolas Cage, that turned up in a storage locker Bolello had purchased. He returned it to Cage. In February 2013, Bolello was arrested on suspicion of methamphetamine possession. 2 days later, he was found dead in a running vehicle inside the garage of his office, of apparent carbon monoxide poisoning. He was 40 years old. Reports at the time described him as distraught following the arrest, and his death was widely reported as an apparent suicide. A&E issued a statement calling the loss deeply saddened, and cast members, including auctioneer Dan Dotson, publicly offered condolences to his family and fiancée. Bolello's death was the show's first real loss, and it introduced a sobering thread that would follow the franchise for over a decade: that the pressures surrounding sudden fame don't always show up on camera. Gunter Nezota wasn't a headline name for most of the show's run, but he was a beloved presence, especially to fans who followed his son Rene Nezota's storyline. Gunter had spent decades in the auction and antiques business long before television found him, and he brought a warmth and easy humor to his appearances that stood out from some of the show's more combative personalities. Gunter died in March 2023 of lung cancer. He was 67. His son continued to run their family store afterward, and tributes from fans and castmates emphasized how much his low-key charisma had meant to the show's community, even though he was never one of its central stars. Daryl Sheets, known on the show as the Gambler, was one of Storage Wars' original cast members and one of its most recognizable faces for over a decade, often appearing alongside his son Brandon. On April 22, 2026, Sheets was found dead at his home in Lake Havasu City, Arizona, of what police described as a self-inflicted gunshot wound. He was 67. In May, the Lake Havasu City Police Department confirmed with the Mojave County Medical Examiner's Office that his death had been ruled a suicide, pending toxicology results, which later confirmed no drugs were present in his system. What makes Sheets' death different from the show's earlier losses is the investigation that followed it. On the day he died, castmate Rene Nezota said publicly that Sheets had been the target of sustained online harassment, and fellow cast members Dan and Laura Dotson later said his family told them the harassment had been going on for roughly 3 years. Police confirmed they were investigating cyberbullying allegations connected to the case and submitted Sheets' phone for forensic analysis. In July 2026, a police incident report revealed that a handwritten note was found near Sheets' body in a bathroom closet, reading, "I could not take any more Facebook bullying, sick." Investigators identified and interviewed a man Sheets had named as his harasser. According to the report, the man was uncooperative, denied any connection to Sheets' death, and said he had not been in Arizona at the time. He reportedly told investigators he had also been receiving death threats himself. As of this writing, the cyberbullying investigation remains open. Sheets' family and former castmates held a celebration of life in June 2026. If you or someone you know is struggling with thoughts of suicide, help is available 24/7 through the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Call or text 988 or chat at 988lifeline.org. No cast member's post-show story is more tangled in litigation than Dave Hester's. Hester, famous for his booming "You Up" bid call, was fired from the show after its second season. In December 2012, he sued A&E and production company Original Productions, alleging wrongful termination and claiming the series was rigged. Hester's lawsuit accused producers of salting storage lockers with valuable items. He specifically pointed to a BMW Mini and a stack of newspapers announcing Elvis Presley's death to manufacture drama, and alleged that producers occasionally staged entire units with the cooperation of storage facility owners. He claimed he was let go after raising concerns about the practice internally. A&E and Dan Dotson publicly denied the allegations, insisting every unit went through a legitimate legal auction process. The case dragged on for years. A judge dismissed some of Hester's claims on First Amendment grounds and ordered him to pay over $122,000 of A&E's legal fees after the network prevailed on an anti-SLAPP motion. But his wrongful termination claim was allowed to proceed toward trial. Despite the legal battle, Hester eventually returned to the show years later, appearing again in more recent seasons. Barry Weiss, known as the Collector, was famous for showing up to auctions in outlandish vehicles and for treating the show more like a hobby than a job. In 2019, Weiss was seriously injured in a motorcycle accident, suffering severe chest and leg injuries. Details of the crash itself weren't widely reported in depth, but the injuries were significant enough to sideline him from public life for a stretch. Weiss recovered and, notably, returned to Storage Wars for 2 seasons in 2023 and 2024. Since then, he's stepped back from the spotlight again, living a quieter life. He's a grandfather now with 2 adult children. Jared Schultz, who appeared on the show for 13 seasons alongside on-and-off partner Brandy Passanti, left Storage Wars in 2021. That same year, he was charged with misdemeanor domestic violence battery following an incident involving Passanti. According to TMZ reporting at the time, Schultz denied the allegations. A&E never publicly commented on the circumstances of his exit from the show, though the timing led to speculation that the arrest played a role. Passanti has remained a main cast member. It's worth being precise here. An arrest and a misdemeanor charge are not the same as a conviction or jail time, and public reporting doesn't establish that Schultz served time behind bars. Claims that any current cast member is currently incarcerated aren't backed up by verifiable reporting as of this writing. Not every Storage Wars story is a tragedy, and Ivy Calvin's is proof of that. Known to fans as the King of Palmdale, Calvin joined the show as a recurring buyer in Season 3 before becoming a full-time cast member in Season 5. Before television ever found him, Calvin had already spent nearly a decade going to auctions and had opened his own thrift store, Grandma's Attic, in Palmdale, California in 2009 as a way to supplement his income. A former arena football player and MMA fighter, Calvin brought a disciplined, math-first approach to bidding that set him apart from castmates who bought on instinct or theater. By most accounts, he rarely bids on a unit unless he sees a clear path to tripling or quadrupling his money. That discipline paid off. Grandma's Attic, a roughly 3,000 square foot storefront, has remained a steady, high-volume resale operation for more than a decade, and Calvin has since expanded into online sales through Instagram and Facebook, posting everything from rare coins to vintage memorabilia. He's continued appearing on Storage Wars through its most recent seasons, now alongside his own sons, Ivy Jr. and Isaiah, who've started stepping into the family business themselves. Calvin has also diversified into real estate and other investments outside the auction world. As of 2025, he still lives in Palmdale with his wife, Wendy, and remains one of the only original cast members whose post-fame story reads as straightforwardly successful. Proof that the show's fallout wasn't universal, even if it also wasn't rare. Renee Nizota joined Storage Wars in its 4th season alongside his wife, Casey, and quickly became known for the couple's chemistry on camera as much as for his sharp eye for secondhand goods. He remained part of the show's main cast through its original run, its indefinite hiatus in 2019, and its 2021 revival. Renee is also notable for a moment that had nothing to do with profit. He once passed up a bigger payday on a storage locker that turned out to contain personal items belonging to Kobe Bryant, choosing instead to sell them back to Bryant's widow, Vanessa. That decision followed him into how castmates and fans talked about him years later, especially after his father Gunter's death in 2023 and, more recently, after Daryl Sheet's death in 2026. Renee was the cast member who spoke up publicly and immediately about the cyberbullying allegations surrounding Sheets, a choice that a number of outlets and fellow cast members credited as coming from real care rather than an attempt to generate attention. Running the family store without his father has not been simple. Customers still ask about Gunter, and Renee has talked about how those conversations keep the loss present even years later. Brandy Passanti, alongside on-and-off partner Jared Schultz, was one of the show's most consistently featured cast members, and the two even briefly starred in their own spin-off, Brandy and Jared, Married to the Job. The couple's relationship ended in 2018, well before Schultz's 2021 domestic violence arrest, and Passanti has continued as a main cast member on Storage Wars in the years since, while Schultz stepped back from the show. In a 2020 interview, Passanti spoke about the personal toll of having her relationship played out publicly on a reality show for over a decade, a strain that predates and is separate from the 2021 arrest, and one she's discussed candidly rather than in vague or sensational terms. It's worth returning briefly to Mark Bolello, because his death in 2013 didn't just affect his family. It registered with the cast in a way that shaped how later losses were discussed. Bolello appeared only in the show's early seasons but left enough of an impression, largely through his flamboyant style and the high-profile Nicolas Cage comic book story, that his death was treated by A&E and castmates as a genuine loss to the show's small community, not just a footnote. When Gunter Nezhoda and Daryl Sheets died years later, several cast members and fans explicitly drew the comparison back to Bolello, a recognition that the show's off-camera history now included more than one member gone too soon. One claim that circulates constantly around Storage Wars, including in less careful retellings of these cast stories, is that the show single-handedly destroyed the traditional storage auction business by flooding small local auctions with amateur bidders chasing a TV fantasy. There's a real, documented version of this dynamic, even if the more dramatic tellings overstate it. Storage auctions did see a genuine surge in public interest and turnout in the years the show was at its cultural peak, roughly 2010 through the mid-2010s, as self-storage facilities and auctioneers across the country reported crowds well beyond what they'd seen before the show aired. That surge brought real friction. Facilities and professional buyers had to adjust to unpredictable, inexperienced bidders driving prices on units that would previously have sold for a fraction of the price, and some auctioneers introduced new rules: pre-registration, deposits, tighter identification requirements, specifically in response to the crowds the show generated. The industry's own trade press, including publications like Inside Self-Storage, covered these shifts as they happened, alongside coverage of Dave Hester's rigging lawsuit, which put pressure on facilities to be able to demonstrate their auctions were run legitimately. At the same time, describing the show as having killed the industry oversimplifies what's actually a longer, more gradual shift. Self-storage facilities nationwide have moved steadily toward online auction platforms over the past decade, a change driven as much by operational efficiency and liability concerns as by anything connected to the television show. That shift was already underway independent of Storage Wars ratings, and continues today. The honest version of the story isn't that a reality show wiped out an entire profession. It's that the show accelerated attention on an industry that was already changing, for a mix of reasons that go well beyond what happened on camera. Storage Wars cast members were never paid at the level their television visibility might suggest, and that gap between fame and financial security shows up repeatedly across their stories. Reported per-episode rates for cast members over the years have ranged widely. Ivy Calvin, for instance, has been reported to have earned between $12,000 and $15,000 per episode at his peak, and with a season typically running in the 20 to 30 episode range, that adds up to solid but not extraordinary annual income once taxes and production gaps are factored in. It's also income tied entirely to being cast in a given season, with no guarantee season to season. That's part of why so many cast members, including some of the show's biggest names, kept their pre-show businesses running rather than treating television as their sole source of income. Ivy Calvin never stopped running Grandma's Attic. Gunter Nezhoda's thrift store predated his television career by years. Dave Hester's underlying dispute with A&E was, at its core, about a $25,000 per episode contract he said he'd already been promised for a fourth season before he was let go. A number that, however large it sounds, still reflects a business built around a TV contract that could be pulled at any time for any reason with limited recourse. Mary Padian's path through the Storage Wars franchise looked different from almost anyone else's on this list, if only because it started somewhere else entirely. Nicknamed the Junkyard Queen, or the Junkster, Padian first appeared on the regional spin-off Storage Wars. Texas, built around a furniture refurbishing business she'd started in Dallas after leaving a job at Architectural Digest in New York. She had a knack for turning discarded finds into pieces designers wanted. And that eye for design, more than aggressive bidding, was what made her stand out. That local visibility led to something unusual in the franchise's history. Producers asked Padian to leave the Texas spinoff behind and join the flagship Storage Wars series in California as a full cast member, a jump other regional cast members generally didn't get. She made the move, closed her Dallas storefront, and appeared as a main buyer on the original show through its 12th season, staying on the cast through more than 200 episodes by her own count. When the show went on an extended hiatus starting in January 2019, Padian didn't stay in Los Angeles waiting for it to come back. She returned home to Texas, and when Storage Wars resumed in 2021, she made only a brief cameo appearance to tell fans she was heading home for good, rather than rejoining full-time. She has never publicly detailed a specific reason for stepping back, though the timing lines up closely with her decision to relocate to Texas and refocus on her own business. That business, Mary's Finds, had to adapt more than once. The physical storefront she'd rebuilt after her Texas Storage Wars run struggled with foot traffic during the COVID-19 pandemic and eventually closed. But rather than shutting down entirely, Padian moved the shop online, where it continues to operate today at marysfinds.com, selling vintage, handmade, and upcycled home goods. She's also spoken about the less glamorous side of reality fame that doesn't usually make it into Where Are They Now pieces. In interviews and on social media, she's described getting inappropriate and sometimes unsettling messages from fans, including strangers making personal requests through her inbox, a detail she's chosen to be open about rather than hide. Alongside the shop, she's stayed involved with Ubuntu Life, a fair trade organization that provides employment for women artisans in Kenya, a cause she supported consistently rather than as a one-off publicity moment. As of 2025, Padian isn't attached to any new television projects and hasn't rejoined Storage Wars in any regular capacity since her 2018 departure from the main cast. Compared to some of the other names on this list, her story is a relatively ordinary one. A cast member who used the show to build a real, sustainable business, then chose to step back from television on her own terms once that business no longer needed the exposure. Mary Padian first appeared on Storage Wars, Texas before moving to the flagship California show, joining for a handful of episodes in 2014 and becoming a main buyer the following season. Known as the Junkster for her knack of turning discarded items into furniture and decor, Padian had run her own business, Mary's Finds, before the show ever picked her up, restoring salvaged pieces for sale to local interior designers, a venture she started with her father's help. Padian remained one of the show's more consistently featured buyers through season 12, with a final guest appearance in the season 13 premiere in 2021, before stepping back from regular filming. She's never publicly explained her exit in detail, though her move back to her home state of Texas around that time is generally understood to be connected. Off-camera, she built on the visibility the show gave her, growing Mary's Finds into an online storefront and, more recently, launching her own product line under the Mary Padian name. She has stayed close with several former castmates, notably Ivy Calvin, whom she's described as one of her closest friends from the show, and was among the cast members who spoke publicly in tribute to Daryl Sheets in the weeks after his death, alongside Brandy Passanti. Brandon Sheets, Daryl's son, was a main buyer on Storage Wars from its very first episode through season 9, appearing in well over 100 episodes as part of the father-son Sheets bidding pair that became one of the show's signature dynamics. His departure came during a period when A&E made a round of cost-cutting changes to the cast, and by several accounts he was let go from the show rather than choosing to leave, a decision he was reportedly frustrated by at the time. Since leaving the show, Brandon has built a career independent of his father's business, working in real estate in Arizona in addition to continuing some auction and resale work. His life changed again in April 2026 with his father's death. As Daryl Sheets' son, Brandon was at the center of the family's public statements following the suicide, the June 2026 celebration of life, and the ongoing cyberbullying investigation, even though he hadn't been a regular presence on the show itself for well over a decade. Multiple outlets that covered Daryl's death noted that Brandon and the rest of the Sheets family have not offered detailed public comment on the specifics of the harassment allegations, letting the Lake Havasu City Police Department's investigation speak for itself while the family focused on remembering Daryl privately. Between Padian's and Brandon Sheets' stories, there's a common thread that runs through a lot of this cast's post-show lives. People who left Storage Wars, whether by choice or not, mostly didn't disappear. They built businesses that outlasted their television contracts, and many of them stayed connected to each other well after the cameras stopped rolling, which is part of why the deaths of Bolello, Gunter Nizota, and Daryl Sheets hit the cast as a group as hard as they did. This wasn't a rotating cast of strangers. It was, by most former castmates' own accounts, something closer to an extended work family, one that has now had to grieve together more than once. Look at these stories together and a pattern does emerge, but it's not the one true crime YouTube titles often imply. It's less about scandal and more about what happens when ordinary people, auctioneers, pickers, small business owners, are thrust into a spotlight that doesn't come with any real infrastructure for handling it. Bolello's death followed an arrest and a very public unraveling. Sheets' death followed years of alleged online harassment that apparently escalated after the show made him recognizable to strangers. Hester's fight with A&E was, at its core, a fight over how much control cast members had over their own portrayal. None of these are simple stories, and none of them fit neatly into a shocking secrets framing. What is true is that reality television rarely accounts for what happens to its cast after the cameras move on. Storage Wars turned auctioneering into a spectator sport and made its cast recognizable far beyond the storage facilities where they worked. For some of them, that recognition brought real opportunity: Weiss's return, Hester's comeback, Ivy Calvin, and others who diversified their businesses. For others, it brought scrutiny, harassment, and pressure that never showed up in the 30-minute cut that aired on A&E.